Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. It's the post-game podcast from Anthony Edwards. We'll say launching the Wolves over the Utah Jazz for the second time in 3 nights in Salt Lake City. We're going to break down how the Wolves turned around a flat first quarter. Also, give a little bit of my take on Ant's dunk heard around the NBA Twitter sphere and really around the world. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and it is a victory Tuesday after the Wolves beat the Utah Jazz on Monday night. The second time in the last 3 days, the Wolves beat the Jazz at their place, at the Delta Center in Salt Lake City. And, of course, this game will forever be remembered as the Anthony Edwards dunk over John Collins game. I want to talk a little bit about that and, of course, lots of other stuff to get to. An impressive win for Minnesota. A beyond impressive Anthony Edwards performance, a hopefully, I don't know that we could call a dislocated finger, completely minor, but hopefully not long-lasting injury to Ant, also an injury to Reid. Lots to get to here after this one. A big thank you off the top, though, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder about the postcast as well. Not only do we cover your team every day, but of course, we're giving you instant episodes after every single Wolves game. Check out the Locked On Wolves postcast. You can find the audio right here on Locked On Wolves on the podcast feed. In fact, the episode before this is the postcast from Monday night's win over Utah. And of course, streaming live after the games on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. You can get rapid reaction to all the biggest moments with the Locked On Wolves postcast, again, live after the games on Locked On Sports Minnesota and YouTube. And then following that on the audio feed for Locked On Wolves, you can find the postcast. All right. So the Timberwolves in this game came out completely flat to start. The first quarter was a debacle. The Wolves were down by 12 at the end of the first. They trailed by as many as 16 in this game. They gave up 37 points to the Utah Jazz in the first quarter. Now, Utah is a reasonably decent offensive team. They're bad defensively, but they're decent on offense. They shoot a lot of threes. They get to the line a fair amount. They're a good offensive rebounding team. They're fairly well-rounded. The biggest problem is they turn the ball over at an incredible clip. It's actually because of the pace they play at. They average the most turnovers per game of any team in the league. It's 20. They're 27th in turnover rate, which is a spot ahead of the Wolves still, because they do play at such a high pace. But no matter how you slice it, they turn the ball over. They're in the bottom 3 in turnover, bottom 4 in turnover rate, and dead last in turnovers per game. But that's really the only major issue with their offense, right? They do a lot of things well still. And of course, the Wolves didn't have Rudy Gobert in this game either. But still, giving up 37 points in the first quarter was far from ideal. And then, sure enough, they don't give up more than 24 in any of the following 3 quarters, and end up only, after giving up 37 in the first quarter, they only gave up 67 over the final 36 minutes of this game, the final 3 quarters. I don't know. I'm beating around the bush too long already. Let's talk about the Anthony Edwards dunk, and then I want to talk about some other takeaways. I do have other takeaways. That Ant dunk in the second half of this game, and I'm going to call it a dunk. I understand the argument that he didn't touch the rim, whatever. I don't care. I don't really care what you call it. It doesn't matter. Semantics don't matter when we're talking about a display of athleticism like that. That was crazy, the Anthony Edwards dunk over John Collins. I don't obviously the dunk against Toronto on the baseline in 2020 in his rookie year comes to mind. The dunk he had earlier this year, I think it was the Spurs game, comes to mind. The one that didn't count over Gabe Vincent that was wrongly called an offensive foul comes to mind. This was up there. I mean, and John Collins isn't like an amazing defender, and he's not a 7-footer, but he's athletic and he is pretty big, right? He's not a guard. He's not Gabe Vincent. And for anyone who hates fun and wants to call it an offensive foul, they fouled each other. Like, if you want to complain about it was simultaneous contact, and you're not going to get an offensive foul call on a play like that when Ant's also getting hit, up the chest and the neck and into the face by Collins' arm. They're contacting each other at the same time, and Collins isn't in legal guarding position. So they're not going to call an off arm in that situation. That's just an incredible display of athleticism. There's nothing else to say about that. And you read the post-game quotes from guys like Mike Conley and Alexander Walker, and they talk about how this is always my thing with Ant. And there's an element of, like, at least among Wolves players, like, I mean, Zach LaVine's the only other guy that had anything close to this in terms of, and Zach that was dunk contest, right? He wasn't the in-game dunker, obviously, not even close to the in-game dunker as Ant is. But in the dunk contest, Zach had the same sort of, like, and this part is like Michael Jordan. When most players seem like they're headed back to the ground, he would seemingly keep going up. And Ant absolutely has that same quality, but he mixes in the power and the ability to do it in a game up, over, around, through people. When it feels like he should be coming back toward earth, that gravity should be taking over, he legitimately, it seems like he's still rising. And in this case, it was the contact that didn't allow him to touch the rim. He can jump from 10 feet out and touch the rim, right? We've seen him do that. So it's not that he couldn't have reached the rim. It's because the contact, the foul that was correctly assessed by the officials, is what kept him from reaching the rim. It's just an incredible, incredible play. And it's obviously a top 3 dunk so far of his career, a top 3 dunk in the NBA this season. Just, there's nothing else to say about it, other than it's one we're going to be talking about for a long time. When it's one that makes your teammates talk about how they're going to be telling their grandkids that they played with you or that they passed you the ball in the case of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, that means it's something special. It means it's something special. All right. I have lots more takeaways from this game. I want to kind of, like, I already set up how poor the start was and how Minnesota overcame the defensive issues early, and then I just couldn't help myself and had to talk Ant dunk. I do want to talk about specifically what some of the issues were early that the Wolves corrected later. Turnovers, obviously. I want to talk about Naz Reid's first half performance and how the Wolves overcame not having Naz in the second half after he left with what the Wolves called a head injury. We don't know anything else about it yet, other than he had left the locker room before the game was over, apparently. So all that to come here on the show. We'll do individual studs and duds here toward the end as well. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They do all the shopping for you, and it's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. You can easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. You just give your stylist your size, style, and budget preferences. You can order boxes when you want and how you want with no subscription required, and they'll just send 5 just for you pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. You just keep what works, and you send back the rest. Your stylist will always send just right pieces, and the fit will be on point. It's like they have style ESP. I have no idea how they do it, but they absolutely will just get you. Stitch Fix makes it so easy. A lot of people don't like to shop, and they can save you that time and effort. Plus, you can get outfits that make you look and feel really good. If you don't love something, you simply just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you look as good, feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. Stitchfix.com/lockedon. As you know by now, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars tomorrow, March 20th at 6 Central, 7 Eastern, for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Of course, the Dodgers are taking on the Padres in South Korea, and that's going to be part of the preview, of course. Again, tomorrow at 6 Central, 7 Eastern, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right. So the Wolves were down 37-25 at the end of the first quarter. Minnesota turned the ball over 7 times in the first quarter of this game. 7 first quarter turnovers. And it really did feel like one of those games. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, no, Rudy, Ant wasn't all that impressive from the field in the first quarter and struggled a little bit with shot making early in the game the other night. No Karl-Anthony Towns, of course. It just didn't feel like the Wolves were going to have any punch to them in the last game of a 6-game road trip, looking ahead to playing Denver on Tuesday night. It didn't feel like they were going to have enough juice. But then in the second quarter, they showed up defensively, and that was kind of the first sign of life. And the offense didn't really start flowing, I don't think, until the third quarter, when it kind of started to gel just a bit. Turnovers were obviously the biggest issue early on, and it was across the team. Like, nobody on the Wolves had more than 3. It was just sloppiness, just general sloppiness. I mean, Mike Conley telegraphed a bad pass. Ant had a couple. Actually, Ant had 3 in the first quarter. Nas had one early. Just a cavalcade of turnovers, and it allowed the Jazz to build. The Jazz, who liked, they play at a top 10 pace. They're happy to run on your mistakes. They had, 13 points off 9 Minnesota turnovers overall for the game. But in the first quarter, I believe they scored all 13 of their points off turnovers on the Wolves' first 7 turnovers of the game. And the last one was a corner 3 toward the end of the first quarter that pushed the Jazz lead to 12. Or allowed them, I guess, I don't know if it's their last made shot of the quarter, but it helped them get to that 12-point lead at the end of the first quarter. And it really didn't feel like the Wolves were going to be able to put up much resistance in this game. But then in the second quarter, the defense got better. And the paint defense that was so shoddy for much of Saturday's game, when the Wolves, held on to beat Utah without Rudy being able to play due to the rib sprain. And sure, I mean, like in this game too, the Wolves ended up only being a plus 4 points in the paint, but they were minus 10 on Saturday. And that paint defense really stiffened up for Minnesota. They ended up with 9 blocks in the game, sans Rudy Gobert. Utah, a Utah team that likes to block shots. They're top 10 in block shots per game. They only blocked 3 shots in this game. Minnesota and the other thing is, Utah was actually a plus 12 rebounding the basketball. But it felt like the Wolves had largely... they had control of the paint. And a lot of the Utah rebounding, like there were some long rebounds. There were a lot of attempted threes in this game. I didn't actually feel like the Wolves were getting pummeled on the glass in this one, as they did for stretches on Saturday and have at other times here, especially since Rudy's been out and even going back, to when Cat got hurt initially. Despite the Wolves being a minus 12 on the glass, they were a plus 4 points in the paint. They blocked 9 shots. I just thought they were more physical as this game wore on. And then I mentioned the Wolves' 7 first quarter turnovers. They only had 2 over the final 3 quarters. So not only did they lock down, they gave up 37 points in the first quarter, and they only gave up 67 in the next 3 quarters combined. And they turned it over 7 times in the first quarter. They only turned it over 2 times in the next 3 quarters combined. Nas was huge in the second quarter. He was huge overall in the first half, allowed the Wolves to only be down 6 at halftime. And he had 17 points in 17 minutes, 7 of 12 shooting, knocked down a couple of threes in 4 tries, had 4 rebounds, left at halftime with what the Wolves called a head injury. We don't know much else at this point. And it feels unlikely that he'd play against Denver on Tuesday night. So the Wolves could theoretically be, and this isn't a stretch, certainly no Cat. Rudy would seem to be at best 50-50, but he's not playing in Utah on Monday. I doubt he's playing at home on Tuesday. And then you added this Nas head injury, which seems ominous. If you leave with the head injury and are quickly ruled out, I kind of doubt you're playing 24 hours, less than 24 hours later after flying from altitude to Minneapolis. That leaves Luka Garza as the only true center on the roster. Leonard Miller, I guess, could see his first ever rotation minutes. It's possible. I mean, they didn't play him in this game, so I'd be surprised if he did. I think it's more likely the Wolves play ultra small for most of the game. Give TJ Warren some minutes at the 4. Obviously, Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson will play a lot of minutes at the 5 in this game, which he hasn't really, I don't think, ever done in a Wolves uniform. I have to go back to his last year in Memphis when Slow-Mo last played the 5 with any regularity. I'm curious to see what Chris Finch does if he is indeed without his three centers. I mean, we talked about a 3-center lineup for so long. Now we're talking about a no center lineup for Minnesota. It's so crazy how quickly these things can shift. But anyway, Nas was big in the first half. My overall takeaways, though, for the Wolves in this game, and they pulled away. Like, I don't need to dig too deep on this one. They ended up winning by 10 on Jade McDaniels hit a 3 at the buzzer. Who knows? Maybe it'll get Jaden going because he was 0-4 from 3 before that meaningless buzzer beater, otherwise meaningless buzzer beater. The Wolves really pulled away in the fourth quarter, and it felt like they had this thing in control. It kind of happened right after the big dunk, right? Overall, my key takeaways from this one, the volume of 3-point attempts that the Wolves have had since Cat got hurt has been incredible. And it's crazy because Karl-Anthony Towns is the best 3-point shooter on this roster. And in terms of attempts per game, he's second to only Anthony Edwards. And the volume shouldn't have taken this long for the volume to increase as much as it has. Coming into this game, the Wolves are up to 20th in 3-point attempt rate, 25th in attempts per game, and just over 32 attempts per game coming into this game. They shot 41 threes in this game against Utah. It's obviously a higher variance performance, but with no Karl-Anthony Towns and no Rudy Gobert in the paint, that's the right approach. And they've also got a bunch of really good 3-point shooters, right? The Wolves are 4th in the league in percentage. And by the way, they shot 16 of 41, and Mike Conley was 0 for 5 in this game. And Conley came in shooting over 43% from 3. Actually, the best 3-point percentage on the team is Mike Conley. He was 0 for 5 in this game. And Ant was only 2 of 8. But the bench for Minnesota shot 10 of 17 from outside the arc in this game. 10 of 17 from the bench. 2 apiece from Luka Garza and Monte Morris. 3 apiece from Jordan McLaughlin and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So 3-point shooting / bench performance. But again, underscoring the volume of 3-point attempts from the Wolves, which is an absolute necessity with no Karl-Anthony Towns and no Rudy Gobert. When you're lacking that much scoring gravity and the team is surrounding Anthony Edwards any chance they get, your best chance is for Ant to drive into traffic and kick, is to read the defense properly. And he did that for the most part in this game, certainly after the first quarter. Again, I talked about only turning the ball over twice in quarters 2 through 4 for Minnesota. Anthony Edwards, by the way, had 0 turnovers in the second half of this game. And he attempted 23 shots, had 8 assists. 32 points on 23 shots, 8 assists for Anthony Edwards, 3 turnovers, all in the first quarter. No second half turnovers as he, I'm going to use the phrase again, launched the Wolves to a win in this one. I briefly talked about the bench, but the bench was huge. It was Ant plus the bench that really got the Wolves to this win. And this was just another game with an example of the Timberwolves' depth showing up. I mean, Luka Garza played well in 11 minutes. Monte Morris, back after the injury, looked a little rusty on Saturday, played 16 minutes, and this one was good. Jordan McLaughlin, man. J-Mac had 11 points in 22 minutes in this game. He played 22 minutes. Jordan McLaughlin was 6th on the Timberwolves in minutes played in this game and was awesome. Looks so confident out there. I want to close with individual studs and duds and talk about a couple of options with what the Wolves could look to do against Denver on Tuesday night, assuming they're going to be pretty shorthanded. So we'll do all that here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. They're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. LinkedIn even just launched a feature that helps you write your job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, individual studs and duds for this one. Obviously, Anthony Edwards is a stud, 32 points on 13 of 23. Again, shooting greater than 50% from the floor. Again, struggling a little from outside the arc, 2 of 8, but hit a crazy 3 from the left wing. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about his performance. 4 of 4 at the line. By the way, only 4 free throw attempts for Ant. The Wolves again were out free throwed in this game. I actually thought it was officiated fairly well in the sense that there were only 26 total free throws, and I'll always enjoy watching a game with less free throw attempts, less whistles overall. And that does benefit this year's Minnesota Timberwolves team because the Wolves are so physical defensively. That said, I'd love Ant to get more than 4 free throw attempts per game. So the Wolves shot 2 less free throws than Utah in this game. But anyway, overall, Anthony Edwards, 32 on 23 shots, 8 assists, 3 turnovers, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal for Anthony Edwards in this game. He was fantastic, especially in the second half. Very, 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 very good game from Anthony Edwards. I'm also going to give a stud to, I got to give one to Nas. I know he didn't play in the second half, but he kept the Wolves offense afloat in the first half, similarly to what Ant did on Saturday when he kind of willed the Wolves to be in the game against Utah and then, distributed, facilitated, et cetera in the second half. It was kind of the first half version of Ant that was higher volume, like trying to force the issue out of necessity. Not just what he thought was necessity. I think it was necessary for him to do that on Saturday. Nas was a little bit of that in this game, and not like Nas was creating for himself as much. Like he was popping open. He was taking the ball to the basket a little bit. He had a couple nice post moves that he a couple lefty hooks he dropped in. But he kept the Wolves in this thing early. So I'm going to give Nas a stud. 17 points, 4 rebounds, 7 of 12 shooting, 2 of 4 outside the arc, 1 block and 1 turnover for Nas in 17 minutes. My third stud is, I could go Jordan McLaughlin. I could go to Alexander Walker. I'm going to go Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson was good in this game. He was good defensively. He was solid offensively. He was tied for second in assists after Anthony Edwards on the team. Mike Conley had a bit of a quieter performance in this one, but Kyle had 10 points on 4 of 8 shooting, made a 3-pointer after an Anthony Edwards behind the back pass. I think it was a left-handed behind the back pass too. Kyle Anderson had 10 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 block, only 1 turnover. He had the second best plus minus on the team, was a plus 20 in 33 minutes, and had to play the 5. I mean, like, this is the Swiss Army knife version of Kyle Anderson that Chris Finch talked about shortly after the Wolves acquired him, a year and a half ago or so. Chris Finch was constantly talking about Slow-Mo being the Swiss Army knife and how important he was. And last year he was that. This year, he came into the year expecting to mostly play the 3 after mostly played the 4 last year, slid up to play the 4 here in the last couple weeks after the Towns injury. And now he finds himself playing the 5 in a tough game on the road against an opponent that's decent at home, that has a little bit of size in the Utah Jazz between, Markkanen and Walker Kessler, of course, and to a lesser extent, Taylor Hendricks and John Collins, but not an easy assignment. And here's Kyle Anderson playing the 4, playing the 3, playing the 5, and initiating offense. And this was a well-rounded Slow-Mo game. I thought he was really good defensively, was a big part of the Wolves' disruption on the Jazz. Not that it's hard to turn the Jazz over, but Kyle Anderson is a big part of that. Want to shout out Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Not a stud. My studs are Edwards, Nas, and Slow-Mo. But Alexander Walker, 13 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 blocks. Hard to stuff the stat sheet any better than that. And by the way, a plus 26 in plus minus in 34 minutes. And that, to me, is more a function of the Wolves bench unit dominating the Jazz bench unit. It's obviously not quite that clean. It's not apples to apples in terms of the minutes distribution and who's playing against who. But like Ant was a -1 in this game in 38 minutes. And I haven't said this in a while, so I'll say it. Individual player single game plus minus is very noisy, as evidenced by this statistic. But a lot of times it has more to do with who the opponent is when that player's on the floor. And of course, with teams mixing and matching, it's very rarely hockey line shifts of all bench versus all, subbing for all starters, right? Like that's not happening in the NBA. So it is very noisy. And that's what's happening here. Like Luka Garza was also -13 in 11 minutes. But Alexander Walker played a lot of minutes with the bench, a little bit with the starters when they went on that third quarter run. Ant was on the floor for the whole first quarter when the Wolves were -12. And didn't get matched up a whole lot against bench players from Utah. Slow-Mo played against bench players quite a bit too, with the way that Chris Finch staggered his rotations, and he ended up with a plus 20 in this game. Whereas Alexander Walker was a plus 26, Ant was a -1. So all that to say, a great game from Alexander Walker. Good to see him play really well. He was a little bit quieter Saturday, but good to see him play well in a place where he played, right before coming to Minnesota. So good game from him. My only dud in this one, and I'm maybe being a little tough on him, but Jaden McDaniels, again, just kind of seemed out of sorts. He did have 8 rebounds, and I almost didn't give him a dud simply because of that, because half the time it's Jaden's allergic to rebounds. I think he turned in a no rebound performance either Saturday or the game before that. But he had 8 boards in 33 minutes, and that was important for an undersized Wolves team. He led the team in rebounding. You know what? I take back my dud. I'll take it back. They needed his rebounding in this game. I know they still got out rebounded by 12, but Jaden was good on the glass. He just couldn't make a shot. His only made 3-pointer was the meaningless one at the buzzer, but maybe it gets him going. He did have a couple of blocks, some nice defensive plays in the second half. Kind of got on an island at times with Markkanen, and Lauri Markkanen did end up turning it over 6 times, but got away with, 3 or 4 travels that weren't called in this game. I thought Jaden was solid defensively. Still looks lost is maybe a strong word, but out of sorts offensively, as he has quite a bit here lately. But I don't know. He did enough on the glass. No duds for me in this game. I thought it was a good performance overall. All right. Tuesday night against the Nuggets, the Wolves could be without all 3 of their centers, which means it's Luka Garza time. He probably starts. I don't know. Well, actually, I take that back. I don't know that Chris Finch will actually do that. He may start Kyle Anderson at the 5. I just don't know how you do that against Jokic. You're going to have to, see some Leonard Miller minutes. Like, you're just going to have to. Not that you ever want Leonard Miller guarding Jokic, but like, you need a little bit of size on the floor. Minot maybe even be more likely to play. Like, it might be Minot and Kyle Anderson in your front court behind Luka Garza. I have no idea. Like, that's the only thing that really makes sense to me. I think Minot probably gives you an element to that kind of bounciness, doesn't know any better, will just play hard and see what happens against the Nuggets. Second night of a back-to-back, he's going to have fresh legs, obviously, and so's Leonard Miller for that matter. The Wolves don't have any more depth. They just don't have any other bigs. So we might get to see one of those guys play rotation minutes. Now, hopefully Rudy's back. I mean, there's a chance that maybe like, hey, he was going to sit one of the 2. Let's play him against Jokic. I'm just a little bit hesitant to believe that, just simply because I think he would have loved to have played in Utah, right? So we will see. But I would be surprised at this point, I guess, if Rudy plays against the Nuggets on Tuesday. So we'll, of course, have the live postcast on Locked On Sports Minnesota. After the game, we'll have that audio here on Locked On Wolves, the audio after that. And then I'll have the postgame pod for you Wednesday. Wolves Nuggets from Target Center, 7 p.m. Central. It's going to be on NBA TV as well for those of you not in the Twin Cities. So looking forward to the matchup, even if the Wolves will be at a rest and travel and health disadvantage Should be fun. Should be a lot of fun to see Ant try and take on Jokic and the Nuggets. All right. That's all we have for today here on the show. A big thank you to those of you that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Reminder, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.